play to hopefully get Ben Gordon a good shot, because he's going to shoot the first shot anyway. I want to make sure it's a good one.
There's a way that I remember this game happening, and then there's what actually happened. Growing up a Celtics fan in the Big 3 era, you got used to unnecessary Game 7s. A couple in 08, what I thought was unnecessary here in 09, there's one from 2012 against Iguodala and the Sixers to go to the conference finals, and in each of those, which were played in the Garden, I never truly felt fear. There was no part of me that believed these unserious teams could actually walk onto Boston's home floor for a Game 7 and win against a couple of All-Stars, despite everything we'd been through this series. The overtimes, the clutch shots, the unexplainable shots. I did not think Chicago could actually advance to the second round. Therefore, I always remembered Game 7 as a blowout. The Celtics came in, the crowd got loud, they got on a run, and it was over by halftime. So imagine my shock upon the rewatch seeing that Chicago actually began this game on a 9-0 run. Ben Gordon was hitting shots, the Celtics were not, and it truly did have that template for every other classic that had taken place earlier in the series. But what was it that reversed the momentum this time? Two words: Brian Scalabrine. Well, it wasn't all him, but given that Boston's bench hadn't stepped up in the least in the first 6 games, it's fair to give him his clout here. During the first, while Boston was desperately trying to scrape together some points and not fall down double digits, he'd check in for Glenn Davis at the power forward position, who hadn't hit a shot, then proceed to hit 2 in a row, which were the final Celtics points of the quarter. It had quite literally been the difference between them entering the second quarter down 8 instead of down 5. With Ben Gordon rebounding quite nicely from his poor Game 6 performance, having 13 in the first, it really was all the difference, as the Mamba clone had seemed to save his best for last.
The biggest key to me, and this is the biggest key, is you can't play hero basketball. I think every team, young teams, old teams, they try to do too much. They come in and they're fired up and they have all this emotion, and then they're playing outside their limitations. And even though it's for the right cause, it's the wrong play. And the key for us is everybody to be aggressive within their limitations and trust each other, and then we're a good basketball team.
Shot and shot. Gordon was now sitting pretty with 17, and the Bulls up 10. This is precisely the part that I don't remember. Chicago had control, and if I hadn't have been some naive kid that hadn't acknowledged the Celtics' struggles throughout the series, I just may have realized, because of their lack of depth and the matchup, that they were actually in a danger zone. That's when he came to the rescue yet again.
Celtics everything along jump shots.
Scalabrine and a late convergence by Miller. Scalabrine has come off the bench. In 8 minutes, Doggy's got 8 points and a couple of threes.
Brian Scalabrine was now up to his series high of 8 points, a whopping 8, which is surprisingly not a sarcastic jab, as the Celtics were already out of gas and it was the beginning of the second quarter. And for as grueling as the series had been, if the bench could even spare a free throw, the Celtics needed it. Here he was hitting threes, just barely keeping the game from slipping all the way into Chicago's control. As fate would have it, that would open the floodgates for the Celtics bench to do something they hadn't done the entire series until now.
Turnover number 8. Austin put in and hit a 3-point shot. He was uncovered outside.
Look out.
Off a Davis screen. It's overboard. Yep, he's out for the first time in the series. House is hot.
I love the fact the Bulls only have 38 points. Beautiful little set play here.
Knocked away by Miller. Another block. Allen gets it again. Mikey Moore tries to put it in. Mikey Moore comes up with 2.
By the time it was over, the second unit had contributed 13 points and leading Boston to a 13-point first half lead. That story had written itself, and it was lost on nobody that those 13 points were more than the bench was scoring during entire games throughout the series. But because they'd done so, there had been a 23-point swing, and Boston was fully in control, pretty much showing that this entire time, although they were missing Kevin Garnett, even more, they were just missing some extra hands on deck. And with those on board, now, as I remembered it, they could cruise to the finish line.
Ryan, Doug Collins has talked all series about one of the keys being the bench. Chicago's bench of Heinrich and Miller have done a great job. Tonight, Boston's bench, your bench, has done a great job. What did you guys do?
I think the biggest thing is we're getting penetration, and then we're getting wide open off of that. You know, once the Rajon or Paul or Ray get in the paint, then they can kick it out, and it puts a lot more pressure on their defense.
As it turns out, you could actually never cruise in the greatest playoff series of all time. But you wouldn't have been able to tell that from the third, where for the most part the Celtics held their grip. Because the backups had held up their end of the deal in the second, the starters were a bit more fresh, successfully staving off the Bulls' run where they would have ended the third quarter up by 9 if it hadn't have been for none other than you know who by now.
Lindsey Hunter has come in. Screen by Noah, opens up the shot for Gordon, right over Pierce, that's a triple! And Gordon for his first in this third from 3, he's got 23.
We didn't finish the quarter out, which was disappointing. I thought we got back into the offensive mentality. We got to lead with great defense, and then we finished the quarter out trying to trade baskets. That's not who we are.
Your bench was great in the first half, 18 points. Did they do enough to earn some trust and minutes in the fourth?
Yeah, but they got to keep doing it.
Given the way the rest of these games had gone, 6 points was just a little too close for comfort, as that wasn't much more than a Ben Gordon or John Salmon's eruption that they were all too familiar with by this point. But what Chicago wasn't familiar with in Boston's house was Eddie House, the fast shooting guard that hadn't provided much other than cardio to this point. Just as the Bulls had been able to bring it within striking distance after an entire half of trying to scrap back,
The natives are getting restless here right now in the garden.
Heinrich with Thor, House wide open. Heinrich fell, he could not close. Big time hit by Eddie House.
Chipped away at each possession.
Andre with the floater around Rose. Rebound by Davis in second. House for 3. Oh!
There'll be a technical foul on Eddie House for taunting the Chicago Bulls bench.
Completely unnecessary, technical or not, something was clearly different about this game. It was one thing for Rajon Rondo to razzle and dazzle with his layups or Glenn Davis to hit mid-range when Paul Pierce or Allen were absent, but the bench shots were bringing in energy. They were funneling in hope and belief from a crowd that had been watching their starters get absolutely blitzed by a young, deep, and energetic Chicago team this entire series. And what's more was, they were coming at moments when the Celtics had absolutely zero room to spare.
Chicago, here's Pierce, Salmons and Miller trying to defend. House, great fake, Gordon flies by, there is a 3! Eddie House has been spectacular tonight with his 4th three-point hit.
This is a streaky guy, but tonight Eddie House, 5 of 5 from the floor, 14 points. The most bench points so far in this series by the Boston Celtics. They had 26 points. The previous high was 25 in the Game 3 win in Chicago.
Brian Scalabrine had entered the game early on with 8 points that had dented Chicago's momentum, and here Eddie House was in the 4th with 8 of his own that kept the Bulls from ever getting it back. This had been the most grinded out series with the craziest momentum shifts ever known to playoff basketball. Every single time one of these games seemed over, the thing we learned was it was never over. However, when the heart and soul of the team, Joakim Noah, fouled out with a little under a minute to go, there had been a feeling that the tide had finally turned for good. All that was missing now was a nail in the coffin.
It's picked up by Allen, a screen by Miller, pick and roll, here comes Miller inside. On that timeout, good play call. 5-point game, 42.3. House. Ray Allen, chased by Miller. Oh, Allen probably. And still got it to go.
You know what? Ray Allen was looking over his shoulder and he saw Brad Miller coming and he knew a hard foul was on the way. He almost turned that ball over. Watch Ray Allen now. He catches his ball and watch him.
The joy, the elation, the pandemonium, it all had came pouring out as the end had finally become clear. After 65 ties, 108 lead changes, 7 overtimes, and an infinite amount of jaw-dropping moments creating memories that would last for a lifetime, a winner had been decided.
Over Marbury is Kurt Mann. Thomas trying for the rebound. Pierce has got it. House will hold it, and so ends one of the most memorable series in NBA playoff history. The Celtics will advance to the second round.
When the dust settled, Ray Allen and Ben Gordon had unsurprisingly emerged as the leading scorers for the series. Eerily enough, 24.3 and 23.4 points per game respectively. It was somehow, sadly, the last we would really see of Ben Gordon as he'd move on to Detroit and more or less never be heard from again. But within Boston lore, he'd always be known as one of the fiercest playoff competitors of all time. With series averages of 19 points, 12 assists and 3 steals, Rondo had proved himself as a premier point guard after abruptly being inserted into the Big Three. And for a rookie point guard with averages in his first playoff series of 20 points, 6 rebounds, and 6 assists, Derrick Rose too clearly had stardom in his future. This series hadn't just given us breathtaking games, it'd given us multiple-time champions and MVPs for the future. The Celtics and Bulls in 2009 was a battle like no other. Heartbreak, failure, grit, success, everything was thrown into this blender in a series where neither team would give as much as an inch. The rule of thumb had become to expect the unexpected. Here I sit, 12 years later, having watched or at least partially witnessed around 180 playoff series since this took place. Have I seen anything get close? Sure. There's been more unbelievable moments. I fell out of my chair a couple more times throughout the years. But to this specific day, I haven't seen anything that truly compares to the greatest playoff series of all time.
Over Noah. Oh! Ray Allen has done it again! For two. He's got 40. He's got 40 points and 23 shots.
Shoot your shot.
Salmon's defending. Oh, look at this. Look at this.
Back out to Gordon. Gordon looking. Gordon for three. Bang! Ben Gordon ties the game.
It's Allen. Noah on him. This is a two-point shot. That is a two-point shot. Screen by Pierce over Heinrich. That's free for the foul. Oh, he hit it. What a dagger thrown in by Ray Allen. Over Rose. Rejected by Rose. Rondo's shot was rejected by Rose. Rose rejects the Rondo shot.
Unbelievable. I mean, what a great play by Derrick Rose.
By Davis in second. House for three. Oh! Gordon flies by. Oh! That is a three. Danny House has been spectacular tonight with his fourth. House will hold it, and so ends one of the most memorable series in NBA playoff history. The Celtics will advance to the second round.